Helen Crompton.
Good morning and welcome to the WAVY Digital Desk. I'm your host, Sarah Good. Today we're going to be speaking about all this fake content online that has been really going viral in both news conversations as well, I'm sure, in your daily life. We're going to be talking about what it is, how to spot it, and what's happening really in the scheme of social media as well as other online sites. Now, Dr. Helen Crompton has been with us before talking to us about AI and technology, where she's back today again at the Digital Desk virtually, and we're going to have a conversation and, sort of maybe debunk or talk about what's going on. Dr. Crompton, thank you so much for joining us again here at the Digital Desk.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure speaking with you before about AI content. I know that sort of runs the gamut, but I just want to give first your background for people that maybe aren't familiar. And in the link as well, you can go back to our other previous conversation about AI in education. But Dr. Crompton is the executive director of the Research Institute of Digital Innovation and Learning with ODU Global and professor of instructional technology at Old Dominion University. So you obviously have a wealth of knowledge around you around this topic and how it sort of functions really in everyday life, right?
Yes, thank you. It's kind of, I'm fully immersed in the AI world and looking at the positives and the negatives, things we need to avoid, certainly.
And I know that we're speaking about more of the negatives today, but obviously there's a wealth of positives of AI. Would you briefly just talk about the AI in everyday life before we sort of jump in maybe into these other, boxes and categories?
Yeah, well, AI has been around for a great long time. Well, 1950s, we had a lot of AI at that time, but it's not until recently we've started integrating more and more in the last 20 years. And in fact, many of us have been using AI on a daily basis without even realizing it, such as Google search has AI systems, BERT and RankBrain, that just help us find what we want, like Google Translate. The way I think of it is if you've used a tool and then suddenly that tool, that program has just got a lot better, it's usually because AI has been incorporated somewhere.
And I know that it's in a variety of apps and softwares, whether we're talking about your Spotify suggested, music, or maybe some suggestions via the internet on Google, on Yelp, wherever you're going for information. So a bunch of helpful ways. Today, however, we're sort of going to talk about some of the negatives, both of AI, but just of technology online. And just to make this newsworthy for everyone out there, I'm sure people have heard of, I want to give, the latest examples that we'll talk about later, but Taylor Swift, there was deep fake pornographic images of her around January where those were going viral, especially on the X platform and formerly Twitter. And then you also have Kate, Princess of Wales, all of the sort of drama and scandals surrounding that. Even though she did come out last week with a video message, there are so many questions from people online. It's amazing, even after that video message, sort of seeing if that's real or fake. But before we jump into maybe, talking about those specifics, can you talk first about what is this fake content or AI generated fake content online?
Yeah, so a lot of us have heard about deepfakes, for example. Deepfakes are very highly realistic, often difficult to detect video, or it can just be simply audio, of a real person saying or doing something that they've actually never said or done. So we might see something and it's not necessarily true. It actually calls into question when the phrase, I won't believe it till I see it. Now we're having to kind of change that. Maybe it's something should change to, I will not believe it until I verify its authenticity.
Right.
Doesn't
And
quite have the same ring, but
and you've spoken a lot with me about, digital literacy and critical reasoning. Can you talk a little bit about how key this is?
it is. So thinking about deepfakes and just AI in general, we need to think about looking at the content, perhaps even develop a healthy skepticism about everything you see, that if you see something, it's not necessarily true. So we need to have everybody, it's not just children, teens, it's kind of, we need to think all ages about when we access content, is that content accurate? And there are many ways actually to kind of detect some of these or make us a little safer. So one example of that is, first of all, check your source. So if you see a video, check where you're getting that video from before you decide to agree with it or decide that's fact. Another way at the moment is to notice like jewelry or something like that. If something looks just slightly odd, that could be a telltale sign, but that's only going to last so long because these deep fakes and various other content is going to get a lot better. So another way to then detect is really check, okay, I've heard it in this place, our other places reporting the same thing. So we need to kind of be critical consumers. when I mentioned digital literacy before, it's thinking, okay, we're using technology. Am I seeing this? Am I believing this without actually going further? We need to kind of think critically. Going back to
And
that healthy skepticism.
right, absolutely. And sorry to cut you off there. I was just, what you said about the jewelry made me think there's a photo of the Pope that went out in the past year where he's wearing a luxury sort of white puffer jacket. And there actually was just an article last week, I think, surrounding all of the Kate Middleton conversation about that jacket and how to sort of think critically, as you said, about the keys there, right? The jewelry, his rosary in this case, wasn't perfect. The zipper was missing off the jacket. Using context clues of, would the Pope really be wearing a luxury designer jacket? But, you know, it looks like the Vatican behind him. You know, it looks like the right place. So you really almost have to take it the extra mile to think and really think about the situation.
Absolutely. Yes, you have to do all of those things every time. And we have to teach everybody else as well not to just run with something. The only problem is often we see it and it might be very dramatic that we believe it immediately. And we need to stop, take a breath, and then fact check.
And something you said there about, you know, the technology evolving. What's happening in terms of the evolution of that that's making it more difficult perhaps to spot these fake images, video, or audio?
Yes, they are really advancing extremely quickly, like nothing really ever before in the ability. Like when we used to create early images of people, they'd have problems with hands and they wouldn't get the right number of digits or something, or a finger would be sticking out of the middle of the hand. Something would be wrong. In the recent ones for the last couple of weeks, that's actually gone back to normal. Now, you know, we can count the right number of digits. So these things are advancing. As soon as we're finding, oh, there's a problem with that, there's many people developing to correct those issues. So I don't believe we will be able to detect very soon any changes.
And I think, you know, oh, sorry, no, I've seen the video too, the fingers and then as well as the mouth and sort of the mouth verbalizing the words that the generator is giving it. And that even seems to be something that has really, you know, advanced as well.
Yes, in all areas. It's advancing in everything. And it's not just, what's interesting about AI at the moment is it's not just for one group of people. It's affecting all of us in every area, whether it be our work life, our social life. Hopefully it's providing a lot of benefits. But at the same time, we also need to be aware because these are very powerful tools. And with very powerful tools, they can be used for very positive things, and they can also be used by people for very negative things.
And do you think that's something where, and I think you've reiterated this before in prior conversations about taking AI seriously, whether you're the one creating the tool or you're the one that's learning how to utilize the tool?
Yes, well, to be honest, I think many people in society have now realized, especially since the introduction of ChatGPT, November 2022, that it's not something that can be ignored. We all now have to pay attention because, again, that movement of progression in AI, and I've studied AI for a good number of years and I wasn't ready for it. It was kind of a shock to me. So we need to all pay attention. It's like educators in schools. They can't now think, oh, it's technology, it's interesting, but I don't want to use it in mine because, you know, other people will, their students will be. So we need to kind of think, and when we're looking, like you said, at content, we know that these systems as well can generate content and there can be bias, there can be hallucinations, incorrect comments, or anything really that we just need to be aware of.
And I think, you know, with ChatGPT being the most famous name right now, at least of a generator software, people think of that as, you know, maybe people are typing in images, right? They're saying the Taylor Swift deepfake, you know, pornographic image like in there. for ChatGPT, they're obviously saying, and people have tested this out as an example, you can't put that language in ChatGPT, for example, and get that. But there's other AI generators, that people, maybe they've copied or they've created, that sort of do have these avenues to create some of these obviously, more negative, toxic images.
Yes, and so that's another progression in AI, in that it's got very, very easy. Even what you were saying there about that we can't put things into ChatGPT and it give us those images. In some parts it can now, because it changes very, very quickly. There's Bing, there's Copilot, there's Claude, there's just many, Perplexity, Gemini. There's so many now that you can actually ask it to create images, and it will create images of whatever. I could ask for you, Miss Goody.
Right.
Can I have a picture of you working for another TV station? It can create these images. Quite often it's harder actually individual people, but that's not going to be far off.
And with somebody maybe with a greater online presence, I obviously have a lot of these videos now, and I have photos out there and different stories from WAVY. That's something where my likeness is out there. It's for conversations and hours of conversations that I'm having with people in these forums. So it's interesting what people can utilize that does exist already online. Does that make you want people to be careful sort of about maybe putting out too much information or being careful? It kind of seems like even a harmless photo of just a smile or a face can be turned potentially into a negative image.
To be honest, I wouldn't say for people to draw back, because AI needs only a tiny little bit of information. Like, I could talk for 15 seconds and you could have all sorts of audio of me reciting huge long text of words I've never said, but it could do that after 15 seconds. So it's one of those that if we've already put a lot of content out there as well, you can't, everything that goes on the internet, you can't just draw it back in. So we have to think of other ways. Obviously, we're looking for legislation and regulations for these, and perhaps even tech companies to actually have systems to detect, to combat some of this fake images, fake news. So we're looking for all sorts of areas to kind of come in and support, to help people. But again, it goes back to that healthy skepticism.
And I want to go back to the Princess of Wales situation that just occurred, in March. Did you have a first thought when you saw all of these articles popping up and these questions about not the wearer's cape, but the after effect, right? The images online that were created of her, the questions about the edited photograph, the questions about the video?
Yes, it just shows that, for example, I've often changed many pictures. Like, I went back to see my dad in the UK and we went on a castle trip, and he took a photograph of me, but somebody popped the head out from the side. And so we were able to remove that person, and I'm able to color correct. I'm able to do many things. When it comes to the royal family, though, they rely on trust from the public. So when Catherine, Princess of Wales, was editing images, she described herself as an amateur photographer. And as we know now, photography is not just taking the picture, it's being able to manipulate that image, color correct. And especially when you're working with children, they'll often be further, away where you don't want them, and you want to move them further in. There was another royal family that actually superimposed the whole set of children below because they couldn't get them to sit still. But when it comes to the royal family, that air of trust comes from authenticity and transparency, and they have to be very, very open. So like what happened, people saw that there was some changes. Like, I think one of the boys in one of the pictures, a photograph with the Queen, the boy looked like he'd been moved in a little bit. So once that's been done, what else could have changed? So I think she's obviously learned from that you have to just go with the photographs as they are, or be very open saying, like, I tweaked these things. But it's such a different place than who we are. We we can change all sorts of things and edit. But when it comes to royalty, unfortunately, and many people around that kind of status, they can't change without being super transparent.
And that's interesting too, because I think that's the large question right now, just sort of as we're entering this more heated election season, talking about how, and just, what's happening around the globe right now. It is dangerous, thinking of people being able to not just misinformation, but maybe put words in a leader's mouth and that go viral online where there's not context, where there's not maybe that news story attached to it. Seeing photos of even just people on the campaign trail questioning if they're real, questioning if those are their voters around them. It leaves to so many questions now for viewers, especially when I think a lot of people do, even though maybe, the best thing is to go to reputable sources, getting their news from social media, getting their news from some of these chat sites.
Yes, and most people are getting the news from those sites, and they've just got to remember that they're not the most reputable, and perhaps not to believe or to do that fact checking. But yes, we have to consider where we're getting our news from.
And I want to go back to, questioning real images as well. Have you seen that in the sort of the online discourse, the questioning of, now they're questioning, videos or photos of people that we see and that we think that is the right photo, right? We think that's the moment in history. But now we're questioning also what's real online because of what you said, the advancements, are getting there, that it does look like the real content.
Yes, so it goes back to that seeing is not always believing, that we have to verify these things. But if we're looking at past pictures, there's always been that ability to kind of change and edit photos.
Right.
That's why insurance companies, for example, for car accidents, won't always focus on the photographs because they could have been edited. But now it's different because, again, the generative AI capabilities are providing that much stronger capabilities. And it's not, the big thing here is it's often been done by certain people, but now it can be done by everybody. The ease in being able to do it is extraordinary. Like a young child, if they can type, and they're not even going to have to do that soon, it'll probably just be a voice. They'll be able to say, like, let me have a picture of, Britney Spears or whoever it is. I won't go with Taylor Swift. I think she's had enough. And, doing something that they didn't do, which we just have to know that this is going to be around, and hopefully tech companies can kind of figure out ways of being able to flag this as a fake content.
And I do want to ask, with all of these tools, with all of these content generators, we know there's a good side to them. So while these are the negative parts, do you think this is in process of getting to some maybe even better technology, even more creativity? I mean, what do you think this can bring us?
Yes, so it can bring so much, and we're actually seeing a lot of this now from programs, AI programs that can detect diseases far quicker, figure out how to support crops in developing countries. There's many, many uses of this. But let me give you some examples of, for example, the deepfakes. Imagine having school children having the real Einstein, what looks like the real Einstein, explaining concepts, or Marie Curie, explaining findings as that person. That's kind of a powerful use of perhaps of these. Also, people have actually used these to, whether rightly or wrongly, it depends on choice, but to mimic people that have just passed away. and to kind of be able to talk to that person more. So ethically, there's different ways of kind of managing this, that they're being used for so many different ways that maybe that's what people would like to see. But going back to the examples of Einstein being able to explain concepts, that's kind of a great use of these tools. I'm going to actually go on to the other side, though, as well, with thinking about the creativity. So a lot of these tools are drawing from past products. So many might say, well, that's not very creative because it's just drawing from the past. However, it's doing it in a unique way that's not replicating. It's like we could always grab things from the internet and pull them in. So that's not very creative. But the way these generative AI are working is it's forming it a different way. So that's kind of a new creativity in a way. But it also allows people to do and be more creative. I cannot draw. I'm not good at creating images, but it helps me be creative in that I can produce images that I couldn't produce on my own.
And those school examples are so interesting because if you're more of a learner that sort of needs an experience, and I know that we're all in those classes maybe that we don't understand as well the material, to be able to hear it in maybe a more creative way could be that one thing for that student that does connect the dots for them or does give them that interest in that subject matter.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine having an interview, like thinking on the generative AI text, that we could have an interview with Einstein or William Shakespeare on topics that they might have talked about in the past, but also new topics. I mean, we could have students debating with William Shakespeare on eating a meat-free diet, and it could pull from past text and maybe whether it would do that. But it's very creative ways of learning and being able to have that dialogue back and forth.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting to view it in that lens. And I think, what we're seeing right now, obviously, as soon as you open up your phone or some of these more negative in your face examples, but to be able to take a step back and sort of see where this could go and the advancements it could lead to, I feel like could only be so positive, especially in terms of education.
Absolutely. Like I said at the beginning, it can be used for very positive things, very negative things. At the same time, we have to just think about the creative ways we can use these. And it's really supporting people across the board. We have to think, okay, these technologies are going to have things that we have to be wary of, skeptical of with news, thinking about that we have to know that they're not always perfect, neither are humans. But at the same time, what can we do with them? What could we do that we could never do before? And there's many options out there of things that we can do that are greatly enhanced. Like I said again at the beginning, that it's like having tools on superpower, that you have a tool, and with these AI technologies coming in, it's now making it a lot easier. You don't have to have all the skills to do many things. It's bringing many people out of poverty. People can start having their own businesses with AI being that side support, that partner in helping them think through business solutions, marketing strategies, just so many things that we have to just kind of be aware, but also what can it do for us?
Well, Dr. Crompton, I think, that's a great place to leave it sort of in where it could grow and what it could go to. I know there's so many other pieces of this that we could have talked about, whether it's, laws that are actually protecting likeness of people that are sort of starting to evolve and different things. This world is sort of, as the technology evolves, obviously the conversation around it does as well. But is there anything else, before we wrap up, that on this topic of the deepfakes and AI and fake images that you just want to share with our viewers just to help them along?
Just a quick reminder to focus on that healthy skepticism. Double check sources, where you're getting it from, make sure it's somewhere else before you jump in and believe it's true.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Compton, thank you so much again for joining us for another, evolution of the AI content in our conversations. I really appreciate all your advice, and I think it's so useful and accessible to people as they sort of day to day are on these different social media apps or online. But thank you again so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.